Hello and welcome to another edition of the After Hours here on Movies and Tea. Tonight we're going to be talking about Donnie Darko from 2001, a very unique film to say the least, and not only a film which marked the debut of Richard Kelly, but also a film which has now become something so ingrained into pop culture that it's hard to imagine cinema landscape without it, especially as so many sort of screenshots and characters that have been taken from it and just taken on a life of their own. It's hard to really imagine the fact that the film came out, didn't do overly well in the States, came over to the UK, and much like Reservoir Dogs, just blew up into this whole cultural thing and went back to the States and just really sort of got a second life. So much so that the studio released it with a director's cut, which added on about another 20 minutes and was released to something of mixed reviews, as many people felt that it took away the mystique of the film, as it overly explained a lot of the mysteries which had made Donnie Darko have such cult appeal. The film itself, it follows a young man called Donnie Darko, and in the year 1988 he goes sleepwalking one night and encounters a mysterious demonic bunny rabbit called Frank, who tells him that the world is going to end in 28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes and 12 seconds. Waking up the next morning on the local golf course, he returns home to find that a jet engine has crashed into his bedroom and would seemingly have killed him if it had not been for his sleepwalking antics. At the same time, the jet engine, the FAA, do not have any idea where it's come from, and so sparks a series of events that will take Donnie through on a rather unique course as he becomes perhaps an agent for chaos, or is he an agent of change? It's something that we'll be finding out tonight as we look at a very interesting 30 days that will lead up to what Frank has foretold as being the end of the world. Now, obviously, Kim, this is a film which I'm a huge fan of. I'm a huge fan of Richard Kelly, and he's one of those directors that I just love his whole filmography, and I wish that he could finally get out of movie maker jail and get another project, especially when we look at the likes of lesser directors like M. Night Shyamalan, Eli Roth, who are both out there producing absolute dreck and seemingly having no problems getting their own projects off the ground, and yet Richard Kelly seems a little stranded of only having the two original projects, a remake of the Twilight Zone episode The Box, as well as providing the script for Tony Scott's Domino. So, Kim, I mean, this is the first time watching yourself. What did you make of Donnie Darko?
It was intriguing, I think is the word. It was kind of like, it's very similar to a lot of very artsy movies that you see. Probably like, I would say early day Christopher Nolan stuff, that sort of style. It's interesting, especially because, a lot of it in 2001, it's pretty much the start of, say, a lot of the familiar faces in the movie. It was like a lot of question marks, right? It was really weird, and then it was just a lot of weirdness that went on, and then it was just like, what? And then after that, you were just like, oh, all these things hopefully will piece together, and they do. So yeah, I think it's really good because I always think that a director who also takes on the role of a writer of a script they always have it shows a lot of, everything that they want is in the film. At the same time, like, I can't imagine how complex that storyboard was when they were putting it together, and when you can execute that sort of storyline that kind of like has that, I guess, loop kind of style, it works really well because you're able to put all these pieces together and then kind of like break it apart and then at the end pull it all back together kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I knew when I gave this film to you. I mean, it was this air of like, oh my god, what happens if Kim doesn't like this movie? Because I hold it in like such high regard for myself, and I still remember like the original first time I saw this film. And it was really the sort of start of a brief period I spent with like Restore Arts doing programming for there at my local cinema, and basically using it as an excuse to bring across films like Bowling for Columbine and Rabbit Proof Fence and City of God, and just films I generally wanted to see and do these one-night screenings. And Donnie Darko was like the first of those screenings, and I still remember like coming away from the theatre and just knowing I'd seen something really quite special, but at the same time not really having a clue what I just watched. So if you're anyone who watches this for like the first time and doesn't have really any sort of idea of what they saw, that's a pretty normal reaction to obviously watching this film. Is it throws a lot of ideas out there, and I think that's one of the great things about this film, is the fact that it, much like a David Lynch movie, it throws these ideas out there and leaves it to the viewer to sort of piece it together. And I think much like there's an article that was like put out years and years ago, and it was like, you're a Donnie Darko fan, and like if you like pause the tape to read the brief history of time travel that Roberta Sparrow's writes in, that you see pages of in the film, and if you get a special edition, you get like a little copy of the book that you can flick through, and it gives you all these different theories about time travel and stuff, and you can piece together all what it all basically means about which reality we're in, and what the different sort of characters represent, which is it's something I really love about this film. And much like Kelly's sort of follow-up, Southland Tales, which again was enough of these films where you sort of like had this great joy of just diving into this world and piecing it together, and this is a film that just rewards so much, like the more you rewatch it, because every time you watch it you notice new sort of details about it. So I'm kind of glad that the fact that you just didn't think, oh, that was just complete garbage, but you just got something from it.
Well, no, I don't even think, like, it's one of those movies I probably wouldn't go back and watch a second time, because I feel like I got what I needed in the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling kind of smart after you said that.
Oh, that's good then.
So, but I'm sure, like, there's many things that, you probably can catch little details and stuff like that if, I went back to watch it a second time. But, I mean, the ideas of the movie are all there, and I think it's all, like, it's really, like, the first part is you wonder if he's really just hallucinating all this stuff. Because some of this stuff is really trippy. But then, as the movie goes along, it's structured in a way where it's still trippy, but then you start wondering if it really is time travel. And there's, like, this whole question mark on how that is, because, the Roberta Sparrow isn't exactly like it's also kind of a trippy character.
Yes, because... I mean, she's like, at this point, when we were introduced to her film, she's like 100 years old, and she's basically lost her marbles, so she spends her days walking back and forth to the mailbox, and to the point where the locals have named her Grandma Death, and have no idea that she's like responsible for this like key piece of scientific writing. It's kind of like up there with Stephen Hawking's brief history of the universe. She's written this book that nobody really knows about, and very few people are actually able to understand it, but yet it plays this key part in the story that's unfolding. But for most people, she's just this crazy woman who goes constantly back and forth to the mailbox. So,
yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's I mean, talking about characters, I think that the fact that there are, like I was saying, like, there's all these familiar faces, Jake Gyllenhaal does, the main guy, and then you see, Jenna Malone, and you have, obviously, Maggie Gyllenhaal, and all that stuff, all those people, and obviously there's much more, you even have Patrick Swayze in this ridiculous role, I love Patrick Swayze, but that was a ridiculous role that kind of just made you laugh. And then, you see familiar faces like a young, Jolene Purdy, who, now has gone on to do Orange is the New Black. So, there's a lot of familiar faces here, and there's a lot of things that are going on here with all these characters. Some of them, obviously, they're not as, I guess they're not as deep as others, but at the same time, it's I really feel, especially in terms of, constructing this whole Donnie Darko character, like, it's just, you get to see, understand a lot of him, maybe not through his interactions with Frank, but rather through all those, like, different psychiatrist visits that he has, and all these weird things that happen when he's in those visits. It's just, I don't know how to, this movie is really hard to talk about, I find. Like, it's really hard to talk about, and there's so much here, and there's so much that's going on, and yet there's so much that you're like, well, how did he get to be able to do all this when he's sleepwalking?
Yeah.
Or, as the movie goes along, he's doing these things consciously. But how is he able to get away with those things? Obviously there's some issues of security going on here.
I think the fact is 1988 and we're not in a complete Big Brother state.
That's true. That's
especially
true.
Like here in the UK. Here in the UK, you would have like 400 CCTV cameras like following his every move, and it would just never happen. But 1988, you get a little bit of leeway there. Yeah. And even though it's obviously set in the 80s, the film thankfully doesn't like do that cliche thing of just like constantly like, oh, remember this 80s thing or remember this 80s thing. It's a very subtle sort of time period that it's set in, and it just plays more into just the soundtrack, the actual 80s parts.
Yeah, and talking about that's a really good thing, because that gives, Donnie Darko a longevity to the movie. Like, you can watch this today and not feel like you're in the 80s so much. And I think that's a really good thing. It's nice to not feel like, there's like this huge decade gap that you're watching something that's old, but Donnie Darko still remains, kind of like, you can still see it happening in today's world, obviously. But like you said, obviously more cameras would probably be around surveillancing the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned already about Donnie Darko, the fact he's in therapy. I mean, right from the start, he's an unreliable sort of source. So you're already never sure whether you're seeing something that's actually happening or it's just Donnie's general mental state. I mean, he's in therapy. He's been described as having hallucinations and paranoia, and the fact he's on different sorts of meds, and that his parents have sending him to a psychiatrist because of earlier issues he's had. He talks previously about the fact that he burned down a house accidentally, and that at the same time he's highlighted constantly as being an incredibly smart individual. So it really sort of throws it up. And you as the viewer, you're not sure what you're watching, and whether these things are in Donnie's head, and whether you're just watching someone's mind sort of unravel, that being like overcome with something like schizophrenia, and the fact that their justification for doing everything is this demonic time traveling bunny called Frank, who it has to be said is played by Greg Araki favourite James Duval, which, as I said, if you're a Greg Araki fan, is a real sort of nice touch to see him turn up there, because he's kind of like an indie darling, much like in many ways when he's revealed as being the man in the bunny suit. I kind of didn't want him to take the head off, and just wanted to just him constantly be in this bunny suit, because the character of Frank is so cool to look at. So much so I've got a couple of Frank dolls around the place here, and I think this demonic bunny is so cool. And I think my Halloween costume of choice, if I was to go, as any of the costumes we see here. So.
Well, yeah, no, but I think that, it had to, at one point, the head had to come off, right? Because you could have taken that bunny as kind of like, it really depended how the movie wanted to be, unveiled. If it was kind of like, he's seeing some kind of demonic bunny for real, like, yeah, then yes, but the fact is, the bunny kind of reflects back into the reality, and, he's kind of seeing into the future. And I think that, you know, the moment that they're talking about, you know, I think that there's that conversation in the cinema when he takes off the head where he's like, don't you see what's going on or something? And then sort of thing. And then you're kind of like, what do you mean? You know, like, what are you talking about? and then the aha moment at the end when it all comes together is just really like shows so much craft in like the writing of Richard Kelly and how refined it is. You know, that's something I really appreciate.
Oh, I totally agree. I think certainly for the end to work, you have to have him take the head off. But when he's in the cinema and he's sort of like, oh, why are you wearing that stupid bunny suit? And he responds with, why are you wearing that stupid man suit? And just leave it at that. He never takes the head off. I thought that would have been pretty cool as well.
Well, for sure. I mean, at the same time, I really think that, you know, there's this like, I think a lot of credit has to go to Jake Gyllenhaal for being Donnie Darko also. Like the way he interacts with Frank and the different things like that he does, and just his facial expressions are freaking creepy. They are so creepy. Like in the beginning, he just like has this like kind of like evil smile. You know, after a job like that, I could really see how he eventually got to, you know, like later movies in his career. Like he did Enemy, right?
Yes.
That sort of stuff, right? And it really reflects in you know, like that even early on in his career, he really had quite you know, he had quite a good talent, I think.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the first shot we see where he wakes up and he's in the sort of the mountain road, and as you said, he's got this sort of smoke. It's not like the normal person, where especially if they're used to sleepwalking, where it's like, oh my god, it happened again. I'm now going to ride all the way back into town now and explain to my parents where the hell I've been all night. But yeah, certainly Jake Gyllenhaal, he really got that. I mean, you're right. He's still a young actor. He's not really been in a huge amount at this point, so he's still largely unknown. And he's playing opposite his sister, Maggie Gyllenhaal, which I think is just perfect, especially because they're playing brother and sister opposite each other. So when you've got the opening sort of dinner table sequence and they're just swearing and calling each other out, it just gets me every time. It's sort of like, tell me, how exactly do you suck a fuck? And you got the dad there telling the younger sister to cover her ears because he knows that basically it's not going to end anytime soon now that these two have started up on each other. The fact that he's digging on her working at Yarn Barn and she's digging on him for just being nuts. It's, as I say, it's just really funny to watch those two go back and forth. And I remember certainly when you had that line exactly, oh, tell me, how do you suck a fuck? Just the audience like erupted in laughter when with that line. It was just so funny. And when you see like how the father's reacting and how the mother's reacting, is just basically at this point just every time there's something like going on, she's constantly drinking. It has been noticed, like whenever there's like someone's talking about like chaos happening in the town or this chaos happening at a dinner table, she's always got a glass of red wine in her hand. That's her. She's liquid medicating herself the same way that her son's being medicated. She's got her own way of dealing with the world around her. So.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, one of those little things that, you know, you notice in the film, even right from the beginning, like just from that moment where he wakes up and he's heading home on the bike. I love how, I think there's a lot of transition scenes that happen like that, where we catch a lot of the details that are going around to kind of get an idea of like, you know, the neighborhood he's in and his sisters and then, you know, his parents and that sort of thing. And then, you know, you go home and I love that the first thing he does, he goes to the fridge and then on the fridge, on the board, it says, where is Donnie Darko? And then you're just like, it's like, well, you know, obviously this isn't a first time occurrence. And then it's just that one little line and you kind of know so much more about this character. Just like, you know, the dinner table reveals that, you know, he's in therapy and all those things that you didn't know before. And just kind of like his relationship with his family as well as, you know, the like, oh, well, what's his problem sort of thing, you know?
Yeah, his problem could be linked to, well, a lot. And
But I really and it's really nice to see that, you know, they take this problem and they're like, well, in a psychiatric way, you know, he's imagining all these things, and at the end we realize they're talking about, you know, the fear of being alone, the fear of being left alone. It's kind of like loneliness is his issue, and you wonder if, you know, and I think that might actually be a point, because, you know, he starts kind of like, I guess, getting more of a grip of the situation and being able to face Frank and all those things when he starts being with Gretchen. And you see kind of like a bit of his character does have a little bit of change, even though some of the things are still, you know, out of his control.
Definitely, when his relationship with Gretchen's, it's sort of like this positive that comes from the situation, the fact that because he didn't die by having a jet engine fall on him while he was asleep, he now gets to embark on this relationship with Gretchen, who herself has got her own issues with the fact that her and her mother are in kind of like a witness protection situation after her father stabbed her mother in the chest about 6 or 7 times with a carving knife. So she's chosen the name Gretchen Ross because she thought it sounded cool, and it kind of plays off well against the fact that Donnie Darko, which is again is another weird name, and their relationship is so random how it comes together. The fact that she sort of comes into the class and you've got
Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, you got Drew Barrymore's teacher, and she does that, you know, that hip movie thing of, oh, sit next to the boy who you think is the cutest, and you think back of your own time in school, and it's like, that never have happened. It's just like, any time the teacher would be like, just get your ass in a fucking chair. I don't give a shit what you said. I mean, yeah, Drew Barrymore here, she was a producer on the film. Her production company, Flower Films, was responsible for the distribution of the film, and she actually said that with her character here, because she plays his teacher, Karen Pomeroy, that the character was so unlike herself because she likes to smile a lot in real life, and with here we have a character who doesn't smile a lot and is very serious, which I thought was just an interesting transition. And we'll obviously come back to her character in a minute, because she plays a lot into one of the sort of like the sort of undertone themes of the film. But certainly with the character Gretchen, the relationship seems implausible, yet plausible at the same time. The fact that she chooses to sit next to Donnie, and they have these number of random occasions, and then suddenly they're going out, or going together, as Donnie calls it, because apparently that's what how they do things in his town, and somehow they end up forming this incredibly close bond and relationship, and it all seems completely believable. The fact that even though Donnie seems completely off the rails and Gretchen seems kind of aloof, yet they have a very sort of believable relationship together, I found.
Yeah.
She's kind of like the polar opposite of like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl situation. She's kind of like the odd girl, yet still got that appeal to her.
Yeah. No, I Jenna Malone is a very interesting actress, I think. I've seen her in a lot of things, and I never remember what I see her in, but I always remember the role that she's in. So, she's always kind of like that person that I have to think back, oh wait, I know this person. I've seen them in something. The way she talks sounds so familiar. And then, you know, you have this whole process of figuring out what this person is, and then I go back and I always remember her in like Pride and Prejudice, as one of the sisters. So it's crazy because she has so much range, and I've always seen her do kind of like more of like a very loud character, whereas this one is more, you know, quiet in that sense, where, you know, she's a bit weird, and she kind of like, I guess that's why she likes Donnie Darko, because he's also kind of quiet. There's like this mysteriousness to him, I guess, and, you know, he's always, you know, he's there at the right time as well whenever when they need him, right? So like you know, when the I don't know what you call it, the douchey boys start to try to get her,
yeah, kind
of thing, and then and then he's just there, and then, you know, she's like, oh, do you want to walk me home or something, you know, and they're a certain part of her character is also very, like, you know, she's willing to take those steps that maybe Donnie Darko by himself wouldn't have done. So, you know, in that sense, it really does work, because it feels like there are many things that happens in his life. I think that's why he listens so much to Frank, where if Frank hadn't been that, you know, daydreaming, makes it like, dream walking. Was it dream walking? Sleepwalking.
Yeah, sleepwalking.
Forgot the word. Yeah. If it wasn't sleepwalking, he would not have, you know, done those things, which made these situations happen, like being able to walk Gretchen home, or, you know, not have died. You know, that's a big one. And in some ways, you know, I think in that sense, there's a point where, you know, he talks at the end about how he feels indebted kind of to him, like, oh, but I have to listen to Frank because I owe him, kind of thing, right? And it's kind of crazy because you think about it and it's like, yeah, well, you know, all these things really do match together, and you're like, well, does Frank predict the future? Is that what he is? Like, is he from the future? Because that's what, you know, we thought it was in the beginning, right? But then there's like that, there's still that whole mystery of how Frank got to where he was and why he's in his mind, and there's still a lot of questions that when the movie ends, you kind of still think back and you're like, well, there's something a lot more deeper to what's going on, that maybe, you know, there's so much more to explore here. And I think that, you know, in that sense, Richard Kelly is, you know, making sure kind of to tell you that, well, my audience is smart. They won't mind something which isn't all answered. And it's gonna make them think a little bit more about what they watched.
Definitely so, and I think that certainly when we look at the relationship that Gretchen and Donnie have, I think it adds a lot to the film, and the fact that it gives it a lot more grandness, especially when you've got so much weirdness right at the screen. And certainly someone like David Lynch, for example, would just go with the weirdness. He wouldn't give us this sort of reprieve, yet Richard Kelly, on the other hand, he gives us these little reprieves, these little moments of grandness, whether it's Donnie and Gretchen's romance, which it doesn't, as I said, it's very unlikely, yet it still works. I mean, the fact that she's talking about her mother and like her father has mental issues, and his response is, oh well, I have those. Which ones does he have? Or the fact that he takes her to see The Evil Dead and she falls asleep within 5 seconds of the film starting, says the person who fell asleep 10 minutes into watching The Howling this evening. So we also have the discussion with Donnie and his friends about the Smurf gangbang and how Smurf sexual organs work. And yeah, these little bits really sort of help break up the weirdness, the overwhelming mystery here. And I just really like the fact he does all this sort of world building within the film. It's not just a case of, oh, I'm just going to tell this like time travel style story and have these weird moments, hallucinations, and have these moments where you're going to question whether the character is sane or not. And I'm going to give you these little moments of sort of breathing space for you to just enjoy the film, and just to not make it such a relentless assault on your senses. And I think that's certainly what helped the film gain its sort of cult appeal. The fact that it's not just one thing. It's not just a time travel movie. It's not just like this surreal experience. The fact that you've got elements of comedy, you've got romance, you've got pop culture references, and it just all comes together in this really sort of delicious sort of stew that's just so much fun to take apart and put together. I mean, it's just stupid little moments such as when they're
But all of these stupid moments, you call them like, the Smurfette's purpose and all that stuff.
Yeah.
What it does is it grounds him. It makes us feel that, Donnie Darko, despite all his, craziness and having to go see the psychiatrist and his abnormality and his weirdness and all that stuff, he still, he still has friends. And he still, they're still like teenagers who talk about weird things, because that's what teenagers do. They sit around and they dream up random purposes for issues that don't really matter.
Yeah, definitely so. And you nailed it right there. I mean, the fact that he has all these sort of issues, yet he's still got this social circle, and his friends are sort of like come to accept that he has these quirks, such as the fact he's daydreaming like one of his friends when we had the first sort of bus stop sequence, and his friend like remarks, he's like, "Oh, you were sleepwalking again there, buddy," and the fact that Kelly writes all his characters, and they're not sort of smart mouth teens, they're sort of very sort of traditional sort of like teenage characters. This is sort of nonsense that teenage boys tend to talk about, such as what Smurfs get up to, or the fact that if the bus doesn't turn up at a certain time, that you can go home, so you don't get molested by some pedo in a van. So, although I have to say that rewatching it this time, I did think that they were kind of overly mean to Sharita. I did feel kind of bad for her. But I did like the fact that Donnie walks off with her earmuffs, and just him walking down the street just seemingly out of his mind and wearing earmuffs is just kind of funny to me. So, now, just want to talk a bit about the character Karen Pomeroy here, played by Drew Barrymore. She is introduced into discussing the film The Destructors by Graham Greene. It's a short story about these boys who commit an act of vandalism, and in many ways it's seen and blamed by the kind of nuts gym teacher Kitty Farmer as being the reason why we've got these random acts of violence appearing in the town. And did you sort of like draw any sort of like links between what was happening, obviously with like what she talks about in Graham Greene and what Donnie obviously does? I mean, for myself, it's hard to say. I was really sort of putting sort of the question is like, do we view Donnie as an anarchist, or is he an agent of change?
Well, I think you can view it in the same way, because that's what if we interpret it the way that, I've never read this before, but I mean, if you interpret it the way that Donnie Darko explains it in class, where he says, I think destruction is a form of creation, and it's because they want to change things, or along those lines. I don't remember the line exactly. Then yes, in a way, you can view him as an anarchist who wants to change things, right? Because in many ways, what he's doing when he's sleepwalking is kind of like a subconscious, especially after you think back to like the fact of what we know about Frank. Then in some ways, the destruction he does, and the vandalism that he commits, is definitely, he's an anarchist in that sense, right? But in some ways, the things that he does has also changed the course of events of what happens to him. Like we were saying, he evades death, and then he is able to walk Gretchen home, and then she becomes his girlfriend, and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, definitely. Certainly, it feels that because Frank saves his life, he's then able to use Donnie to invoke these elements of change. The fact that because of the destructors being taught in school, it leads Kitty to rally the PTA to ban it. And in the original script, the book gets replaced with Watership Down, which is kind of fitting, which is obviously tied more into the bunny theme going on here. And because of it, basically gives Kitty the fuel that she needs to bring in Jim Cunningham, here played by Patrick Swayze, who's kind of like a motivational speaker and self-help guru who has this theory of life, that you make bad decisions in life because of fear, and that by controlling fear that you would make positive decisions in life. And because of Donnie, these acts that Donnie's being sort of, I don't want to say forced, but he's being guided to carry out by Frank, such as like flooding the school, and it sort of sets it so that Jim Cunningham can then be brought into the school and try and capture the youth and bring them back on track, so they're not just going all crazy. Because obviously Kitty sees the fact that the destructors are being taught, and that she feels that because they're teaching the destructors in school, that it's caused the students to go off the rails and vandalize the school, and that by bringing Cunningham in, because she's like one of his biggest supporters, that it's all going to bring things back on track. And it did feel like very much the fact that Frank, because Frank obviously knows the end game here, the fact that he knows that the fact that we've got to get Cunningham to come in, and then we can obviously finally it's sort of like a long game that he plays where you can finally expose Cunningham for who he actually is. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was kind of funny that the fact that you've got Kitty saying that Graham Greene to the destructors is pornography being taught in class, and yet she's here backing a secret pornographer, which I thought was kind of ironic, really.
I think that's the thing, is that a lot of things as the movie goes along, it's kind of like all kind of links together. Because if you think about it, what Jim Cunningham says about fear and how he analyzes Donnie Darko when they're having that little, talk during school, it kind of makes sense also how he talks about Donnie Darko, how a lot of these things are out of fear. And out of, that fear of whatever, right? And then, you have the psychiatrist that comes in who tells him, who starts telling his parents that, I believe that Donnie Darko, has a fear of being alone or loneliness or something like that. And it all kind of links together where you're kind of like, whoa, it may be that, is that really the cause of why he's, dreaming up all these things, right? Because at that point, you're still not quite sure what Frank is. Because he's obviously something that happens in the future. But during the process, is it a loop? Is it the fact that Frank is there as, because he's looped back before and he's just an image of his memory that's been left behind?
It's so interesting. I mean, this is again where by revisiting the film you get to sort of enjoy sort of piecing it together. It's the fact that because Frank empowers Donnie to commit these acts, the fact that it gives Donnie sort of like the strength to totally derail Jim Cunningham's motivational seminar, where everyone else is sort of buying into this bullshit that he's spouting, and Donnie's like the one who like gets up there and just basically calls him out in front of everyone, and he sort of like continues to evolve into this persona change. And we see it earlier in the film when they're doing like the workshop classes, and you got he tells basically Kitty to shove the card up her ass.
Yeah,
which is just such another great scene. And it ties in nicely the fact that they talk about that in these workshop cards, the fact that a character finds a wallet on the ground. Does she keep the money and return the card? And is this a product of fear? And later we have Donnie discover Jim Cunningham's wallet outside his house. And I wondered, is this something Jim Cunningham set up, that he leaves his wallet outside his house to see what people do? That's just something that dawned on me on this latest viewing. So as I said, even multiple viewings later, you still find stuff these stupid little bits to obsess over. So, but how do we find Kitty? Because she's here played by Beth Grant, and Beth Grant is kind of renowned for playing these agents of just aggravation, like these self-righteous elder characters who basically cause nothing but themselves to be like a pain in the protagonist's ass, really, with by them being so forceful in a view. In this case, her pushing like Jim Cunningham as being this wonderful man who's out there trying to save the youth of America.
I don't know. I don't remember her in anything else.
She's the pageant organizer in Little Miss Sunshine as well.
Oh, yeah, that's what she looks so familiar. No, she looks familiar. I just couldn't pinpoint where she's from. But yeah, no. And then you have, I think her character is good. I think it's there for, it's just the right purpose, right?
Yeah.
To promote something, but at the same time create kind of like she believes in a very I guess, a very idealistic kind of world where things go a certain way and things must be done a certain way, and, you know, everything has to be in place in their perfect little way, the way she sees it. And that's why in her mind she's just like how she tries to have that little workshop for fear. She's very black and white. You know, there's no gray area. And that was one of the things, you know, that in this world that they're in, that Donnie Darko challenges her, because he doesn't believe that everything is categorized in, you know, fear or not, right?
Definitely not. And I think it just makes it all the better that when her world suddenly comes crashing to the ground when Cunningham's outed as being a paedophile. And the fact that she can't deal with the word kiddie porn. Much less has the great line, "I'm really doubting your devotion to sparkle motion." Her daughter's little dance troupe that we see perform here, and I think, yeah, I mean, certainly the character of Jim Cunningham, he's absolutely nailed by Patrick Swayze, who's, I think if you're going to have any sort of 80s throwback, he's the guy to get. And it was marked the sparkle little revival period for Swayze up into his death from cancer. So, and he's really interested in Jim Cunningham. I think he just really nails the part. He sort of like goes into this knowing how to play this character. The fact you got to play him like some Christian televangelist. Yeah. And I think that's perhaps what it could have been in a different sort of script. They would have been like a televangelist sort of character, but instead he's a motivational speaker who just has one of these weird programs that makes absolutely no sense when you put it into real life terms. As Donnie obviously points out, the fact that life isn't so clear cut. It's not all like fear and positivity. So
yeah.
Okay, soundtrack wise, what did you think of the soundtrack? 'Cause I really like the soundtrack. I love really cool 80s stuff. And then you get Echo and the Bunnymen and Tears for Fears, and we also get Gary Jules' cover of Mad World, which was a #1 hit for Christmas over here in the UK. So once again says a lot about what our tastes are in the UK, because we also managed to get Rage Against the Machine's Killing in the Name of to #1 one Christmas as well. So go us. At the same time, we've got a score by Michael Andrews, which brings to mind the works of Danny Elfman, but without that sort of like sort of like moments of exuberance. It's more his sort of like the Danny Elfman sort of haunting and mysterious sort of score, which sort of underpaints many of the moments in the film.
Well, the score is really good, and I think like the music that I remember most of would probably be like those transition scenes, like in the beginning where I talked about, you know, where he's biking home and the music that goes on during that time. I really liked what went on with there, and I think there's another scene or two in the back that does the same thing when he kind of wakes up and then he goes off, or it was something else, and you know there's all these kind of different moments where the soundtrack really matches what's going on, and yeah, I mean I can't pinpoint the songs exactly, but I think the soundtrack works really well with the movie itself, and like the different sequences that they're going, and kind of like just building on, like the score built on a lot of like, you know, the mystery and kind of like a bit of the suspense, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of bizarre. It was kind of bizarre when I loaded up the digital version. They switched the music around so that the opening sort of biking sequence, they put Never Tear Us Apart by NXS, when the original version is The Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen. And it was weird that when we get the Halloween sequence, then they put the Killing Moon in there, which is, I mean, I love that song, and no matter, regardless of which version you watch, whether that song appears during the Halloween sequence or it appears in the opening sequence, it works both ways. But when I think of Donnie Darko and I think of him riding home on his bicycle and the Killing Moon play, that's the version of Donnie Darko that plays in my head. And at the same time, we've got the Head Over Heels by Tears for Fears, which like plays out this montage of where we go for the school, and we sort of open with like the back of the school bus opening, and we go through the school and we see all the different characters in the different groups, and I think it was a really cool sequence in the fact that
that was a great sequence. That was the sequence I was trying to think of and I forgot about. It was just like, passing the torch from one person to the next. It would follow one person, and then it'd follow the next person, and then follow the next person. And it was so great, and just, seeing that, school world that we wanted to know from teachers, from different groups of students, and, that sort of stuff. And I thought that scene was great. Like, one of the best scenes of the movie.
Yeah, and you get to see it establishes where everything is in the school, and as you say, it establishes all the key groups. We get to see like where's Donnie. We get to see where his younger sister Samantha and her little dance group Sparkle Motion. And they're doing their practice, and we see obviously them being watched by Kitty, who's like their dance teacher. We get to see Karen and her boyfriend of sorts, Kenneth, here played by Noah Weil, so exciting if you like ER, because he turns up and he does his thing. We also get to see like the school bullies, played by Seth Rogen, really early performance by him, and Alex Greenwald, who plays the rather psychotic Seth Devlin. It's so bizarre when you look back at this and you see Seth Rogen here, and especially as he's obviously gone on to do huge things now. He's like, this huge entity of his own, and here he's sort of coming off Freaks and Geeks, and he's still kind of unknown, and this is kind of like side character who really only gets a couple of lines in the film, commenting that he likes Gretchen's boobs and derailing their little science presentation when they're talking about creating these goggles for infants, so they got something to look at in the dark.
Huh.
But yeah, all the sort of 80s selections are real. They're not sort of like obvious 80s selections. I think that's what really sort of helps the film, and I think a lot of people hadn't heard of like The Killing Moon by Echo and the Bunnymen, and they hadn't. They probably wouldn't have heard Over Heels by Tears for Fear as well, and I think that by having those sort of key songs and them not being sort of stand out. I mean, even Mad World, it sort of gave the original version of that song many sort of plays. Well, as I said, when we look at the version we get here, the Gary Jules piano drum one, which plays such a key memorable sequence where sort of all the main characters sort of wake up, and we go from one to the next, and we see them all in their sort of lives as this sort of like end note to the film. It really sort of creates this really powerful and incredible moment.
Yeah.
And then we obviously get Sparkle Motion, who danced to Notorious by Duran Duran, which is it's pretty cool. I like how that song's used, and it makes a nice sort of contrast to the fact that you've got this element of you get to see basically the whole town, all the sort of the main characters of the town are watching the Sparkle Motion performance while Donnie's off burning down Jim Cullingham's house. So it
was a nice comparison though, when they were doing the two things going on at the same time kind of deal.
Yeah. Did you kind of get the ending of this film? Or did it sort of like leave you go, what the hell was that about?
No, I got the ending.
Okay.
I think I got the ending. I'm just saying, like I was saying before, there are some things in the ending which is kind of like, well, it makes sense because, it loops kind of. And at the same time, it kind of like, it makes sense on what, it stays true to what it's trying to do the whole time, right? But there are some questions that are left unanswered about, the process of watching the movie. But I'm pretty happy with the ending. I don't have an issue with how it ended.
Awesome.
At least I think I understood what it was about. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that was it again. It was one of the things when I came back after watching the original. I was like on the internet in seconds of getting in the door, and I was all like, "What does it all mean?" So, if you've been paying attention to the dates, it kind of like basically says that we're back at the start. So, I mean,
kind of.
We can
kind of at the back of the start.
I mean, we can go into a whole in-depth explanation and completely gives you all the weird little bits and pieces for you if you want, but we'll do that for another time maybe. But because we're going on a little bit here as it is, with me getting a chance to geek out over this movie, which I think was going to be always expected. So, so for reviewing, what would you want to pair this with? I've got a few ideas.
Oh, I had a lot, and and then I eventually looked at my list, and I was like, wait, this is all Jake Gyllenhaal movies. That's not right. And then I was like, maybe this guy does really similar movies. That's why I have all these movies on
He takes risks, yeah.
He takes risks, and a lot of movies, he's actually done a few that kind of have that element of, I don't know, not really a loop, but that sort of stuff. But anyways, the most obvious one was, my first choice was 2011 Source Code.
Okay. Yeah.
That's, time travel, obviously, at its rawness. Where I'm a big fan of Source Code. I don't know how big it got, but it's pretty much, if you don't know what it is, it's really like a soldier who wakes up, and he wakes up in someone else's body, and he discovers that, he's part of this experimental government project where he has to try and find a bomber on a commuter train. But he can only go back every time for like 8 minutes. So he has to try and like complete the mission and keep going back every time to figure this out. I really like the movie. It's really great. It has, Vera Farmiga and Michelle Monaghan. And, obviously Jake Gyllenhaal is in there. It's a really great movie, like a great time travel sort of movie. Going on that kind of like same time travel thing, I also went with 2014's indie time travel film, Time Lapse.
Okay.
Which has, one of the, I don't know, have you seen it? Have you seen Time Lapse?
I've not seen Time Lapse, no.
Yeah. Time Lapse is with Danielle Panabaker. Before she was part of, the Flash and all that stuff. But yeah, no, Time Lapse is a really good movie, in talking about time travel, which also has that loop feeling where, it's about, 3 friends who discover that their neighbor has this machine that takes pictures 24 hours into the future. So, as they start seeing this, they start, having to work around, what's gonna lead to that image to happen, and that sort of thing. And then, they have to piece all these things together. It's very, very good, and I don't want to, break the, I don't want to spoil anything in that one, because I feel like that one's really worth visiting, especially if you like time travel movies. Yeah, and then my third movie is more of kind of like the concept of movie loops, which kind of like end where they begin sort of thing. And I'm going to go with a classic, which is Christopher Nolan's Memento. Okay. Which I don't really think needs a lot of explanation. So I'm going to just leave it at that.
Got a few ideas of things you can watch. Again, if we do the time travel ones for myself, I mean, obviously, first off, we would say Time Crimes from 2007. Directed by Nacho Vigalondo. Certainly, this is a film which has got a lot of hype, especially from fans of time travel. On a similar sort of theme, we have Triangle from 2009, which is directed by Christopher Smith, a director I really wish got more sort of cred than he gets, really, as he gave us not only Creep, but also the rather fantastic Severance as well. And here, we have a film where a single mother, played by Melissa George, she goes on a boating trip with several friends, and they're basically forced to abandon their boat, and they end up on a derelict ocean liner where they've become convinced that someone is stalking them. But again, not everything is really as it seems, as they soon discover. Next up, we have a film which I would say is really similar in tone to Donnie Darko, just in the fact that it plays jump rope with as many genres as possible, and that's the 2011 film Detention. Where a serial killer known as Cinderella is on the loose, and the principal basically rounds up all the disgruntled students and likely suspects and put them in all-day detention as they try to figure out who is Cinderella. This is a film which has got, it's got comedy, romance, time travel, and many other random genres thrown together in what is probably an equally sort of random mashup that we obviously get with Donnie Darko. finally, I mean, if you wanted to see more Jake Gyllenhaal performances other than, obviously you said Source Code already, I would also recommend checking out Nightcrawler, as well as checking out his film Velvet Buzzsaw. Two really fantastic performances there, which show a range of an actor who, much like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is just absolutely not afraid to take on the most random of roles, and just really shows no sort of like boundaries, much like his sister Maggie Gyllenhaal, who, let's not forget, starred in the S&M Fantasy Secretary. And both of them just absolutely fearless with the roles they're willing to take on and challenge themselves as actors. So those would certainly be my personal picks there for this one. So that brings us to the end of another edition of Movies in Tea. We hope you've enjoyed listening as always, and it also brings us to the end of our After Hours block. So I think more excitingly, we get to finally announce who is going to be our director for season 4. And Kim, who are we going to be discussing for season 4?
Season 4, we're going for the big guys now, right? I'd definitely be considered more bigger than everyone we've had done before.
Certainly, I mean.
Yeah, so we're going with Taiwanese director Ang Lee.
Yeah, Ang Lee, a director who, much like the films we've been discussing have jumped genres, here we have a director who has proven himself to work in any genre that he feels like, as well as blasting forth onto the scene with a fascinating Cantonese language series of films known as his Father Knows Best trilogy, made up of Pushing Hands, The Wedding Banquet, and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, which will be the focus of our first episode when we return, as we'll be looking at the Father Knows Best trilogy in one hefty block, as we look at his filmography, as we obviously go from the Father Knows Best trilogy through to The Life of Pi, charting the work and themes of his filmography. So make sure you join us next time as we kick off season 4, which will this time be looking at Ang Lee. As always, you can find the rest of our archive over on moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, where you can listen to all 3 of our previous seasons, whereas the After Hours episode. So if you want to hear us discuss the filmographies of Paul W.S. Anderson or Guillermo del Toro, or more recently Sofia Coppola, you can find it all on there. And on every Friday we post our double feature as part of our Friday Film Club, where I recommend a film and Kim recommends a film, and we highlight those films that are of interest to both of us. Also, if you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe buttons where you're listening to us on Podomatic or iTunes or Google or Spotify or Castbox, wherever you happen to be listening to us. If you do hit the like and subscribe buttons, it really helps, much like leaving us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. We love to hear feedback from you guys, and anything you want to let us know and what you feel about these films. We always love to hear it. Also on social media, if you want to come and be our fake cyber friends, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, where we post regular updates of things not only linked to our directors, but things that are generally interested in the world of film as well. But until next time, thank you as always to my co-host Kim, and thank you everyone for listening, and we will be back next time with season 4 kicking off, looking at the films of Ang Lee. Good night.